Good morning and welcome to worship with the community of Westside Unitarian Universalist Church, where compassion leads us to work for justice and equality. My name is Carol Kappa and I am your worship leader this morning. I'm glad you're joining us for the service today, and it's my hope that this gathering will renew your sense of community and connection and nourish your heart, mind, and spirit. I want to give a special thanks to all of our service participants today, especially the AV team volunteers, host Caroline Nixon, and co-hosts Sue Anderson and Cindy Fountain. And also a big thank you to all the other Westside volunteers who make this service possible today. Our pastoral care representative, Kelly Flanagan, meditation leader, Diane Austin, social justice chair, Cindy Fountain, as well as our vital staff, which is our Director of Lifespan Religious Education, Nikki Kennedy, pianist, Dr. Yuki Kumamoto, and our office administrator, Dawn McGee. So at Westside, we're raising the next generation of Unitarian Universalists, and we want them to know that they are an important part of our community. Several years ago, we chose to be radically inclusive and to adopt a multi-generational worship where our services include all family members. So welcome to all children and youth of all ages. Westside is a community of many beliefs, genders, and sexualities, a community of diverse cultural, racial, and class backgrounds. We're a community of varied abilities and gifts. Some people here find inspiration in the great books, others in the great outdoors, and others still in great conversation. But whoever you may be, we welcome you to bring your whole self into this community. If you're so moved, you can try out the chat feature on Zoom by just typing in some words of welcome to both members and visitors who are joining us this morning. But on behalf of this church community, I want to say to everyone, welcome. I'm really excited and pleased to introduce our guest speaker today, former Westside member, Reverend Foerster. She's been a Unitarian Universalist minister since 1985. She began as an extension minister, growing fellowships in Seattle, Washington, into full-size churches with ministers. Following that, she served congregations in Arlington, Texas, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and Cincinnati, Ohio, 3 separate churches there as parish minister, interim minister, and assistant minister. Also Tyler, Texas, and is now the half-time consulting minister at First Jefferson UU Church right here in Fort Worth. Annie was a member of Westside until she failed her retirement for the 4th time and agreed to work with the First Jefferson congregation to help it grow. She also currently volunteers for SAGE, S-A-G-E, in Fort Worth, and that stands for Seniors Assisting in Geriatric Education. She does do things to help students in the medical profession understanding the needs of older patients. She also volunteers with Eldera, a worldwide organization that pairs seniors with children and youth seeking mentors in disciplines of their choice. And with that, she is currently working with a 9-year-old South Korean boy who is interested in writing stories. Don't ask her about him, or she said she'll tell you endless stories. She's worse than a grandmother. And now I invite you to take a deep breath. And from wherever you are, just settle into this sacred space that we create. And let us worship together as we listen to this morning's prelude performed by our pianist, Dr. Yuki Kumamoto.
Good morning. Our opening words this morning were written by the Reverend Scott Taylor, who said, "Let us drink from the stories that sustain us." We gather as a house of stories, and as we learn of those who have gone before, the way in front of us becomes more clear. As we weave together the tales of who we are, our loneliness lessens and the web of our oneness is revealed. As we listen deeply in those times of tender trust, we descend into the longings and learnings, hopes and fears of the humanity we share. Beneath the wells from which we drink, there is a deeper well that feeds them all. Come, let us tell each other tales of our thirst. Let us drink from the stories that sustain us all.
We sing of golden mornings, we sing of sparkling seas, of prairies, valleys, mountains, and stately forest trees. We sing of flashing sunshine and life-bestowing rain, of birds among the branches, and springtime come again. We sing the heart courageous, the youthful eager mind. We sing of hopes undaunted, of friendly ways and kind. We sing the roses waiting beneath the deep piled snows. We sing the earth's great splendor, whose beauty round us glows.
The Flaming Chalice is our Unitarian Universalist symbol of both the heritage of our past and the light of hope within this congregation today. If you have a chalice at home, please join Reverend Foerster in lighting it.
We tender this flame, opening the book, turning to a page yet to be written, opening a story yet to be told. May we fill this fresh page wisely. May we write a new story into being. May we together inscribe the page with hope.
There is always a light. When we're ready to see it, there is always a light. When we're ready to be it, to see the light, to be the light, to raise our eyes in the dark of night, to climb this hill, together we will.
There is always
a light.
There is always
When we're ready to see it, there is always a light.
There is always
When we're ready to be it, to see the light, to be the light, to raise our eyes in the dark of night, to climb this hill, together we will.
There is always
Shine,
There is always
we're ready to see it. Shine, light,
There is always
we're ready to be it. To see the light, to be the light, to raise our eyes in the dark of night, to climb this hill, together we will.
There is always
There is always
in the
when we're ready to be
darkness.
it, to see the light,
Let
to
your
be the
bright
light, to
heart
raise our
burn
eyes in the
out
dark of
loud
night,
and be
to
a
climb this hill.
gift in
Together
the
we will.
world.
Shine your light in the darkness. Shine your light in the darkness. Let your bright heart burn out loud. Be a gift in the world.
Please join me in reciting our affirmation this morning. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve others in community, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with creation. Thus do we covenant with one another. Our time for all ages today will be presented by Reverend Foerster.
Our story this morning, The Beautiful Tiger, was written by one of our own, the Reverend Christopher Bice. There was once a beautiful and powerful tiger. One day, she was captured by a cruel man who crept up behind her while she was resting. He put her into a cage, which he kept in the jungle, not far from his house. And every day he would bring out a bowl of water and some food for the lonely, angry tiger. Sometimes the tiger would see her own reflection in the bowl of water and she would say, "My, I am a beautiful tiger." And when the man heard her say this, he would lie to her and tell her, "No, you are not a beautiful tiger. You're a very ugly tiger. You're a pitiful creature." Sadly, in spite of what she saw in the water bowl, the tiger began to believe the man. Some days, after she ate her food, she would walk back and forth in her small cage and feel energy and power moving through her body. And she would say, "My, I am a powerful tiger." And when the man heard her say this, he would lie and he would tell her, "No, you are weak and puny. You're in a cage. You're a pitiful creature." Sadly, the tiger began to believe the man. And then one day when the man was nowhere around, a lion happened to walk by the tiger's cage. The lion saw the tiger inside and spoke to her. "Beautiful and powerful tiger, what are you doing lying about in that cage?" "Do not make fun of me," replied the tiger. "I know that I am neither beautiful nor powerful." "I'm not making fun of you," said the lion. "You are surely the most beautiful and the most powerful tiger I've ever seen. I'm only surprised to see you lying here when you are clearly strong enough to leave that cage." "You really think I should break out of here?" asked the tiger. "Oh, quite easily, I should think," replied the lion. The tiger was not so sure at first. She had been told so many times that she was weak and pitiful. It was hard to believe the lion's praise. But suddenly, it seemed that she could feel that familiar energy and strength moving through her body. She remembered the beautiful tiger she used to see reflected in her water bowl. The tiger began to pace back and forth in her cage. And then, almost without thought, she leapt against the cage door, which gave way to her power and flew open without any resistance. Once outside, though, she seemed dazed. "Well, that cage didn't even have a lock on it," she said. "I spent so much time of my life stuck in there, and the door wasn't even locked. What was I thinking?" The lion looked at her with soft brown eyes and said, "Those kinds of cages don't need locks. Someone lied to you, and it is the lies we believe that keep us all in our cages. Fortunately, it is the truth we believe that sets us free."
Thank you, Reverend Foerster. Our joys and concerns today will be shared by Kelly Flanagan, a member of the pastoral care team.
Good morning. We are grateful you are here with us for this service. This is the time in our service when we offer witness and support for one another's journeys. While we continue to meet online, anyone can submit a joy or concern at any time by emailing the pastoral care team at pastoralcare@westsideu.org or through the web form located in the Care and Support section under the Programs tab on the homepage of the church's website. As we share our joys with others, those joys are multiplied. When other hearts know our joy shines all the brighter. As we share our concerns, our community can offer its care. When other hearts know our sorrow, our burden becomes lighter. This week's joys and concerns submitted before the start of the service are a concern from Philip and Joe Hennon. Mary Hennon, Joe's wife and Philip's mother, passed away in April. There has not been a service scheduled yet. Our hearts are with the family at this difficult time. And a joy from Tanner Trask. I passed my third and final licensing exam on Friday for my new job. It's great to have that stress off my shoulders. Thank you for sharing those with us. It is good to share with one another as sharing draws our community closer. Please know that our pastoral care associates are available to support you with deep listening and, when needed, through our InReach Fund for short-term financial support of members in need. We are here for you.
Thank you, Kelly. This morning's centering song is Meditation for Breathing by Sarah Dan Jones and sung by members of the First Unitarian Society of Denver. Diane Austin will then lead our meditation of shared compassion.
Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. When I breathe in, I'll breathe out. When I breathe in, I'll breathe out. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out,
I invite you to join me in a time of centering. Each week here at Westside, we open our hearts to those in our community who know both joys and challenges, and to all those who suffer. I will begin with a poem, Everything Falls Away, by Parker J. Palmer, before we move into a time for silent reflection. A bell will sound to signal the start of the time for your own meditation, prayer, or reflection, and it will sound again at the end. Everything falls away. There's a thread you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. Sooner or later, everything falls away. You, the work you've done, your successes, large and small, your failures too. Those moments when you were light, alongside the times you became one with the night. The friends, the people you loved, who loved you, those who might have wished you ill. None of this is forever. All of it is soon to go, or going, or long gone. Everything falls away, except the thread you followed, unknowing all along. The thread that strings together all you've been and done. The thread you didn't know you were tracking until, toward the end, you see that the thread is what stays as everything else falls away. Follow that thread as far as you can, and you will find that it does not end, but weaves into the unimaginable vastness of life. Your life never was the solo turn it seemed to be. It was always part of the great weave of nature and humanity, an immensity we come to know only as we follow our own small threads to the place where they merge with the boundless whole. Each of our threads runs its course, then joins in life together. This magnificent tapestry, this tapestry in which we live forever.
Technical difficulties.
May it be so, blessed be, and amen.
Thank you, Diane. Good morning, Westside. This is your social justice rep, Cindy Fountain. Westside's plate offering for August is the South Central Alliance of Churches, or SCAC. The South Central Alliance of Churches is a coalition of congregations in Fort Worth serving zip code neighborhoods 76104, 76109, and 76110. Our ministry seeks to help meet emergency or one-time needs, assisting individuals and families past a single difficult situation, such as verifiable loss or change in income or a medical emergency. It is our hope that this will result in enough stability for them to continue to manage their lives. Westside has been a member church for more than 10 years. SCAC has been transitioning before and during the pandemic and does not have office space at this time. A new member church, Baker Chapel AME, may provide that space at the completion of renovations. In the meantime, SCAC continues to serve our neighbors virtually. Through the generosity of the member churches and individuals, we have been able to maintain rent and utility support in the range of $2,500 to $3,000 a month. This small cohort of churches is helping sustain lives in our community. Please donate as you can in support of Westside's commitment to SCAC. Thanks so much for your generosity. You can give online now through the church's giving page or by using the Give Plus app, and you can select the Service Project Fund. The link has been put in the chat. You can also mail a check to the church. Thank you so much for your offering. Enjoy the musical offering from our pianist, Yuki.
Thank you, Yuki, again for that beautiful offertory and the wonderful video. And thank you, Westside, again for your generosity. And now please turn your attention to Reverend Foerster for this morning's readings and then her reflection, Once Upon a Time.
I have two brief readings this morning. The first is from Mark Nepo's The Book of Awakening. He said, we all face a turning point when resisting the flow of inner events suddenly feels more hurtful than leaping forward into the unknown. Yet no one can tell us when to leap. There is no authority to bless our need to enter life, but the God within. How often we thwart ourselves by holding tenaciously to what is familiar. It is instructive, if chilling, that in floral shops, the roses that won't open are called bullets. They are discarded because they will never bloom. They have turned in on themselves so tightly that they can never release their fragrance. Yet as spirits in bodily form, we have the chance to tighten and bloom more than once. But even spirits, if turned in on themselves enough, may grow accustomed to being closed. Unlike roses, however, the human chamber can be shut down for years, and still it takes but one breath from the true center, and we will flower. The second reading is Tim O'Brien's The Things They Carried. Stories are for joining the past to the future. Stories are for those late hours in the night when you can't remember how you got from where you were to where you are. Stories are for eternity, when memory is erased and when there is nothing to remember except the story. When I first heard the words, once upon a time, I thought they were the most beautiful words I'd ever heard. Magic in some way, possibly religious. Tell me a story, I would say, and a story would be told. Once upon a time there was. And then I heard, in the high and far off times, O best beloved, and I knew that stories could be told in many ways. Later, I learned to make up my own stories, and eventually I learned to write the story of my own life by using a journal. After that, there was nowhere else to go, nothing else to do than to become a professional storyteller, a preacher, a minister, a teacher. A storyteller says it all. You know, I've always wanted to visit Australia. This is not off topic. I've read a lot about Australia and I've read stories that take place there, but I've never gone. Someday, perhaps. I read something recently that made me revisit this wish, something different from what I'm used to, about the way a stranger is greeted. You know how when you meet someone here, there are a series of stock questions like, what do you do? As if you are your job, or where are you from? As if you might be a stranger from a strange land, or the role questions. Are you married? Do you have children? But in Australia, I've heard, the greeting goes like this. Happy to meet you. What's your story? What's your story? What's your story? The implication is, as I read it, you can choose what story to tell. The story that best represents you, the story of the person you want to be someday, or the story of how your life is unfolding at this very moment. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we were all open to hearing one another's stories? What story would you tell? Would it be the same story you told yesterday? This is important, really. Give this some thought. Is the story you tell when asked who you are one that you discovered or one that you wrote by yourself? Or is it the story like the caged tigers that was told to you by someone else and you believed it and you retold it? This happens. Listen, I'm old enough to remember that at one time there was a person in every newspaper staff whose job it was to see that women didn't get away with telling their own stories. I was the publicity secretary for a women's organization. And after every meeting, I would write up what took place, who did what, and send it to the local newspaper who claimed they were interested in this kind of news. And I would write something like this. Mary Smith was elected president of the organization for the coming year, and Jenny Jones gave a talk on the importance of communicating with political representatives. And the newspaper staff person would edit my copy so that it read, Mrs. John Smith has a new role in the organization, and Mrs. James Jones gave a little talk. This group is the auxiliary to the XYZ organization for men, to which their husbands belong. True story, true story. Every month I argued with the editor, and every month I lost. It's style policy, I would be told. Women's stories aren't important, he was really telling me. But enough of us around the country argued and kept on arguing until we were eventually allowed to tell our own stories in our own names. So I ask you again, what's your story? Once you realize you can choose to tell your own story, you understand how important it is to ask for the story of everyone you meet. Because if you don't, you're going to miss some very compelling people. I remember years ago being introduced to a neighbor I assumed wouldn't have a story that interested me. I could tell just by looking at her. I mean, my children were in high school while hers were just starting grade school. I worked and she stayed home and kept house for her husband. Her clothes spoke of money and mine from being pieced from a pattern in my spare time. I was from around here and she was from out of town. And I probably said to her, hello, how are you? And she said, fine, how are you? And we went our separate ways. Only we didn't. We kept showing up at the same meetings. We kept showing up at the same music programs, the same volunteer organizations. It turned out that we had a lot in common among our differences. And finally, we began to share stories. Hesitantly at first, and then with more interest and more urgency. We also had some stories that were very different from one another's, which gave our relationship depth and breadth. And we eventually became friends, good friends, because we knew each other's story. We tell ourselves stories in order to live, Joan Didion wrote in the White Album. It's the way our brains work. It's the way we've evolved. Once told, she said, first to ourselves and then to others, stories give structure and meaning in our lives. Stories help us organize our experiences while giving us a sense of self. Told often enough, they dictate how we will behave next so as to keep the story intact. But our story, says Didion, isn't immutable. We are constantly adding to it from new experiences, updating it to keep it factual. Some psychologists believe that our stories are what constitutes our very personalities. We check our stories before we act. We respond or set out on a new venture. Consistency is important to the story. That might be why so many people are resistant to change. Too much alterations in one life might lead to rewriting the story, and that predicts chaos to the settled mind. And yet, as we mature, we often change the focus of our stories. And think about this. Seeing our lives at the age of 12 or 16, say, gives us a different picture from what we see when we look back at 30 or 50, through a fog of more mature experiences. Our life stories aren't created in a vacuum either. We pick up on cultural cues and narratives, and these deeply inform the stories we tell to ourselves. Cultural mythologies are appropriated by us, and we find ways to fit them into our own narratives so that we feel as if we belong. Thus, the story we choose to tell at any given moment with any particular audience in any unique situation is colored by all these influences. And our stories come in all shapes and sizes. There are biographies and novels, features and novellas, articles and short stories, paragraphs and sentences. There are resumes and application essays, medical histories and genealogies, memories and dreams. Sometimes your story is large by necessity. Sometimes it's rendered small by fear. Sometimes it is all facts and sometimes joyful fantasy. I came across an interesting concept about personal storytelling on YouTube. If you want to hear the whole rendition yourself, you can find it by searching either for Daniel Pink or the One Sentence Project. He tells the story of Claire Booth Luce, one of the first women in Congress, who approached John Kennedy one day and boldly said, "Mr. President, you do not understand the basic structure of leadership. All great leaders have a single sentence." Intrigued, he asked her what she meant, and she said, "Well, look, Abraham Lincoln had a single sentence. He saved the Union and he freed the slaves. FDR had a single sentence. He lifted us out of the Great Depression and he saw us through a war. You have at best a muddled paragraph. Nobody understands what you are trying to do. Get yourself a sentence," she said. And after Daniel Pink told this story, the One Sentence Project caught on in schools. You can also see videos on YouTube of youth and adolescents telling their sentences, who they are, and what they plan to do with their lives in one sentence. Oh, it will bring tears to your eyes, but it will bring a smile to your heart. Apparently, leaders need a sentence like journalists need a soundbite, but most of us utilize interactive chapters, stories that are structured around a common timeline and theme. These stories have different uses for, say, social interaction or selling yourself as a commodity, apologizing or repenting, promising and predicting, and most importantly, for reminding yourself that you are special. Narrative psychology. Oh, and yes, there is a psychological discipline about writing and telling one's own stories. Narrative psychology claims we can alter our own stories and rewrite our own scripts in ways that improve our ongoing lives. Narrative psychologist Dan McAdams, who has written several books on the topic of personal stories and their importance in our lives, says we can take control of our own stories. We can examine them and make sure they are written out of our own experience and not colored by stories we were told by someone else, like the beautiful tiger story. Although these stories are largely determined by our cultures and personalities, writes McAdams, we do have a degree of control over what we tell ourselves about our own lives. Even if we take themes from our society, we are the ones putting them together, and we have some conscious sense of doing so. There are things we can all do, according to McAdams, to make our stories better, because making our stories better makes our lives better. One of them is to think positively. Whether we are optimists or pessimists, he says, you might want to try the approach of realistic optimism. That is, seeking a truthful view of events with a modicum of hope. I think people need to interrogate themselves with respect to their life stories, says McAdams. What I'm trying to do here, well, that's the long-term gain and how I'm going to leave the world a better place when I'm through. that kind of interrogation. So this far, I have given you 2 assignments, if you hadn't realized it yet, 2 pieces of homework from today's reflection. First, what is your sentence? Not as easy as it sounds, but kind of fun. And second, do some editing of your story where it's needed. Be aware of your story and how powerful it can be, both on others and on yourself. But there's another point to this story I've been telling you this morning. Stories are important not just to the lives of individuals, but to communities as well. Communities have histories, communities have dreams. Holding it all together are the stories that members of the community tell to one another, tell to the group. I once visited a church as a guest speaker, and after the service, one of its members began to tell me a story. We are in the search process for a new minister, she said. She did not look happy. I asked how it was going, and she said, "Oh, I don't hold out much hope. We have a wonderful interim minister. We would love to keep her, but it's not allowed. We always have good interim ministers, but what's available after that for our calling is never as good." And I said to her, if that's the story you believe, it will always be so. I mean, they were just beginning the selection process, and being the minister of the church just down the street from them, I eventually was asked to speak to their search committee. I related to the group that conversation I had had with a member of the church, and I asked how many of them felt the same way. Most of them. And I repeated my warning, if that's the story you believe, it will always be so, because we act out the stories that we tell. I'd like to think that I was responsible for their successful search. They chose an excellent minister for them. She ended up staying for 18 years, helping them grow, expanding their service to the community, creating an excellent children's education program, and coming to believe in themselves. Oh, the first 2 years of her calling were made difficult by those who still believed she was not good enough or that she would not stay. But she persevered and she helped them change their story. Human beings have this ability to engage in episodic memory. They can recall scenarios from their past that have a beginning, a middle, and an end. They are all little stories. Narrative psychologist Dan McAdams calls them little stories. The ability to do that also enables them to see the future, he says. You, as an individual, can imagine your future as little stories that haven't happened yet. But the same is true of committees. What are the stories that you tell about Westside Unitarian Universalist Church? The ones you believe at this very moment. Do you speak fondly of favorite ministers and disparagingly of those who disappointed you? Which stories do you tell more often? Do your stories reflect determination and a vision for the future, or are they all looking backward on better days and hurts inflicted? Remember what McAdams said, by understanding how we create our stories and how they are structured, we can alter our own stories and rewrite our own scripts in ways that improve our lives. But we need to ask questions of our stories, both the individual ones and the ones that live among us in community. Questions like, who am I? Where am I going? Where do I come from? What do I need? What do I want? These questions play a large role in motivating the development of an integrated life story, says McAdams. And they mean nothing to the community unless we tell them to each other and listen for any agreement or none. One of the most exciting discoveries to me in the study of narrative psychology is that successful people's stories often contain themes of redemption. That is, when the story starts out badly, and bad stories happen, when it includes negative events like disruption, deceit, or loss, the story can be transitioned into something positive. For instance, says McAdams, a negative story might be about getting fired or divorced. But a generative script retells it as an opportunity to try something new, to come out of it better than you were before. And here's the best part of our stories. You can begin a new narrative before it comes to pass. You can begin a story of what you hope might happen. No, what you believe will happen. You can name the tiger in the cage and break open the door that isn't locked. You can generate a new story out of the courage it took to see the redeeming possibilities in a negative event. What are the stories you are ready to tell about your future based on your history? You've been locked down because of COVID-19 and you've lost your momentum to grow. That's a story I've heard over the past 18 months in many churches. But this is how you could be telling it. We've been locked down because of COVID-19, but in spite of our not being together, we've had a success in many areas. We need to start planning how we will come together again and what we will do to celebrate this thriving community. You see, name it, declare it. So many stories, so many possibilities. Once upon a time, I have a dream. I am beautiful and powerful, whether you think I am or not. What's your story? I would like to know. What's your story? I want you to know yourself. What is your story? Anything is possible. No, everything is possible.
Thank you, Reverend Foerster, for that wonderful reflection this morning. Our closing hymn this morning is number 1019, Everything is Possible, sung by members of the First Unitarian Church of Baltimore.
We've cleared off the table, leftovers safe, washed the dishes and put them away. I've told you a story, tucked you in time, at the end of your knockabout day. As the moon sets its sails to carry you to sleep, over the midnight sea, I will sing you a song no one sang to me. May it keep you good company. Or you can be anybody you want to be. You can love whomever you will. You can travel any country where your heart beats, and know that I will love you still. You can live by
This chalice was lit to tell a new story, to build on the living story, the one that begins with the new day, the new dream, the new hope. Keep the pride you have in your history of daring and doing as you begin to tell the stories of your dreaming and your daring. We can extinguish this chalice because we take it into our hearts. You are the story of the world. You are the world coming to know itself. May you trust that all you will ever say or do belongs in the story of the world. So may it be in all our lives.
Please join me in the congregational closing. Let us go in peace, believe in peace, and create peace in our lives and in the world. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.